What is going on, everyone? I hope you are all doing well today. I am joined today by the one and only Geek Apprentice. A little bit of a different video today. I know I have recently been covering a lot of Switch 2 stuff, seeing as there's a lot of hype around that, but there's a game I really wanted to talk a little bit more about, seeing as that I got to do a little bit of content on it last year and didn't really get to cover it as much as I wanted to, so I'm excited to cover a much more deep dive discussion on The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Geek, how are you doing? You just beat the game. How are you doing?
I am doing well, and I should let listeners know that you might hear my small 7-month-old in the background. He's actually not small, he's quite chunky. And that's actually the reason why I only just beat Echoes of Wisdom, because he was born maybe like a week before the game came out. So I waited quite a long time, but I'm very excited for the discussion.
Yeah, so it's always great to have you. And I guess, yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started. So, let's kind of go back to when this game was announced, back when that Nintendo Direct happened. I believe it was last June, and it was like the mid-announcement. And, at this point, we were still kind of riding on the high of Tears of the Kingdom. Lots of people were still talking a lot about that. I was definitely not expecting another Zelda game the following year,
Me either.
let alone a game where we're playing as Princess Zelda. So, what
hmm
what was your reaction whenever you saw the game, and what were your kind of expectations going into it? Were you super excited? Were you super hyped, or not so much? What were kind of your expectations going in?
I was definitely surprised to hear about it because I just kind of assumed, especially with the wait that we had for Tears of the Kingdom and the wait we have for Breath of the Wild, frankly, that it would be a hot minute before we got anything else. And I had kind of forgotten about the concept of top-down 2D Zelda games. 'Cause some people will quibble and say it's not really a 2D game, and I'm like, whatever, it's close enough. Um, but I was excited, especially because I was one of the people that actually really liked the I'm blanking on the graphic and the art style of the remastered Link's Awakening. I quite enjoyed it, and I was always someone that said, oh, they should do the Oracle games like this, but I understood why people were not a fan of that, like, toy look, and I can understand that. When I found out that we were playing as Zelda, some people were surprised when I said I was excited about that and looking forward to it and interested in it, because I had said for years, I don't want to play as Zelda. And I think it was always me just trying to push back when people said, oh, we need to play as Zelda. Because in my mind, I'm like, no, we don't need to do anything. But I, maybe to a fault, trust Nintendo and the creators of Zelda that if they felt that this was a good idea, then hey, I'm going to give it a shot. And as I'm sure we'll discuss, that was a very smart move on their part. And I would say going into it, I was definitely expecting to enjoy it. I don't think I was expecting how much I would enjoy it, because I was very, I don't want to say cautious, but definitely intrigued by the idea that we weren't sword fighting. I knew we would probably sword fight in some capacity, that there would be some aspect of Link coming into play there. Um, but the whole idea of the echoes, I was intrigued by it, but definitely wondered, like, how is this actually going to work? And is it going to be extremely open world? Is it going to be a mix? And um, so excited, but definitely curious what it meant.
Right, and I basically, just to piggyback off that, I was kind of in the same boat, especially when I found out that we weren't going to be just fully sword fighting throughout the entire adventure, that we were going to be summoning we were going to learning these echoes of enemies and objects to basically summon to fight for us. My excitement really didn't start to go up, and as we'll discuss later, when they revealed the sword fighter form, and more so the hint that there was possibly going to be a bit of a darker storyline with Link being evil and coming face to face with him, even though we find out later it's
Yeah.
basically just an echo of him. But still, just that prospect of Link being evil, I was like, this is hinting more, and especially with that whole still world. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But just there's a lot of hints that they were
Yeah.
it was looking like a bright and pretty Zelda game, but underneath there was a lot more going underneath the surface than we knew about, and so that's what intrigued me most of all. And so after playing it, did this game reach your expectations, or were they greatly surpassed?
Oh, they were greatly surpassed, because I would say similarly, I thought, how gimmicky is this echo mechanic going to be? And the puzzles were fantastic. I know we'll go into details about that later, but I loved how much like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the possibilities felt almost endless of what you could do with Echoes, especially because of being able to do certain dungeons in a slightly modified order, learning that other people did dungeons in different orders. So I'm like, oh, that means you were able to do this dungeon with this Echo, and I didn't have that Echo, so I had to do something else. And the story was not at all what I was expecting, especially with the art style. I was so surprised by how dark it was in certain respects, and yeah, just between the gameplay, the art style, and the story direction and the music, I felt like it definitely surpassed all of my expectations, and I was very thrilled about that.
Yeah, same here. I literally, when there are certain moments that happen through the story, I was like, so we're actually bringing this back after so long? Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. So yeah, my expectations were greatly surpassed as well. But yeah, let's jump in just the whole point of the game, which is the echoes. The whole point of finding and using those echoes. So did you enjoy this mechanic? Did it take you a while to kind of get, kind of used to it? It definitely took me a while to get used to it because, I've been so, the sword fighter, just fighting enemies with a sword. It just took a lot of time for me to be like, okay, I'm learning an object or an enemy and just summoning it to fight in my stead. It took me a minute to kind of get used to that. But I actually really did enjoy learning and using the echoes. And so, did you enjoy using the echoes? And more importantly, did you find yourself using the echoes more or the sword fighter form more?
I could definitely tell you I use the echoes more. And I know we'll touch on this later, mostly because I do feel there were a few things about the sword fighter form that I would have changed, or I don't want to say fixed because I don't know much about game development, but there were some things about sword fighter form that definitely kept me from not using it as often unless I had to. But I absolutely loved learning the echoes, and I think without realizing it, I wasn't grasping it as much as I could have. I would say maybe halfway through the game, I was starting to really unlock the potential of the echoes. I had started watching somewhere around halfway through, playing it, some of the videos by a different content creator, Kat Bergerson, because I wanted to wait till I had gotten to a certain point to start watching his dungeon design videos so that I wasn't spoiled on anything. And there were so many things he was talking about with echoes. I was like, I didn't know I could use that echo that way. So I had loved learning the echoes. I used the heck out of the P-hat for the longest time.
I think everybody did.
Yes, the P-hat was fantastic. But then once I started getting super strong enemies, I loved the battle between, okay, I could use this really strong enemy, but that takes up 4 of the triangles. So maybe it would be smarter to use this one that only uses 2 triangles so I can have 2 of it, different things like that. So I loved using it, but didn't really unlock its greatest potential until at least halfway through the game. And yeah, like I said, I definitely used it far more than I did the sword fighter.
Yeah, I would have to say mine is more 50-50. I found myself using the echoes, also swapping back and forth towards the sword fighter form until the latter part of the game when the difficulty started to really get up there and the enemies started to get more and more difficult, and closer I got towards the end of the game. I just could, I remember stocking up on those potions that would restore your, magic gauge, and I used that sword fighter form so much towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
And so, I love using echoes, and I definitely summoned them, and I really found it really cool to swap back and forth really quick between normal and sword fighter forms. You summon an echo, go to sword fighter form, and then you fight alongside those echoes. I thought that was a really cool concept. You mentioned there were some things that you wish was done better with the sword fighter form. What things were you hoping could have been done better with sword fighter?
This is where me being such a button masher game player comes into play, because I think a lot of people would say, I'm not sure that actually is a fault of the game and more of a fault of the player, me, and I'm definitely okay with that. Although I will say, using echoes sometimes made bosses and enemies super easy, and then other times I was like, no, you do still have to have skill. You do still have to have brain power to figure out these puzzles. I mean, I was shocked at how many times I had to ask for viewer help because I was like, I love puzzles. Why am I having such trouble with this? And then you figure it out and you're like, oh, that's so easy. What's wrong with me? But with the sword fighter, and maybe this would have been mitigated had I done better about the side quests. And certainly in a second playthrough, I want to focus more on the side quests, but I get so story driven that I just want to go. But I really didn't like the gauge. Like, not saying that we should have had unlimited usage of the sword fighter. That would have completely defeated the purpose of using the echoes. And for anyone that wasn't a fan of the echoes, again, that would be really dumb, because then you would be forced to use it and then potentially learn that you like it. I just wish there was a way to build the sword fighter form better. I'm torn because I wanted the gauge to last longer. And again, this could be user error, because when fighting those different bad echoes of Link, I felt like I was constantly running out of my sword fighter energy, or even some bosses. And I know that I learned later that there were echoes I could have used to help fight that. Or I constantly, at least for 2/3 of the game, forgot about Try being able to latch on to things and pull it, or me follow that item. Completely forgot about it so much. And I'm like, why? This is such a fantastic mechanic, but I kept forgetting about it. I don't know why, because I feel like the game did make it obvious. And I don't know if I just got better as a player or if Link got easier. I do feel like all of the different times we interact with Link and we're fighting his echo, he got easier. And I don't think it was necessarily because I had more weapons, more echoes, or a larger gauge to be able to use sword fighter form for longer. He just genuinely felt like he somehow was easier. But I don't know. I don't have a solution to the problem I'm proposing. It just always felt like a rush to try and defeat whatever enemy I was dealing with when I used sword fighter form, because I would lose it so fast. But that could be user error.
Yeah. The only thing I can really think of that I think, because I don't know if you knew about this, but there's like a training dojo in Kakariko Village where you can fight.
I learned that after I finished, and I was like, what? How did I not find this?
And you can refight the bosses along with these like challenges, that these like small little challenges, and the more you complete, like you get like these special scrolls, and the more you get, it makes the gauge decrease less and less. So that's the only
that would have helped. Yeah.
So that's the only thing, and I didn't realize that. I didn't actually do that till after I beat the game either, so I had no idea either. So it was not something that's like I guess that's one thing. Like they could have like put that out. Maybe an NPC tells you, "Hey, this place is opened," or something like. They could have flashed that more in your face.
Maybe.
That would.
Or if I explored more.
Yeah. One thing that I did not like, that, and I'm sure a lot of people have, and I've heard a lot of people complain about this too, is just eventually you learn a ton of echoes, and that line of echoes just gets endless.
Yes.
And I was just like, you couldn't have,
so many of them that you don't use.
Right. And you couldn't have found a way to sort these in a much more efficient way to find the ones that you definitely know you're going to be using more than others, or just, finding ones that you'd be using for puzzle solving and ones that you would be using for like combat, or just, they could have done so much with that. Like, and they sort of had that kind of similar issue with the fuse ability in Tears of the Kingdom. And they're like, well,
yes.
You're like, well, people like Tears of the Kingdom, so I guess let's just do the same thing here. I'm like, you could have been better. That's the only thing that I really... Yeah.
I wish I could have turned off echoes. That way I could have been like, okay, I have 50 echoes, but I'm going to turn off 30 of them. So that
that would have helped.
They just don't even show up.
Yeah, that definitely would have helped. But yeah, that's really the only thing I really could think of. Other than that, I really enjoyed this game's really, if you really think about it, it's very fast gameplay. You're summoning echoes, going to sword fighter form, or just, or if you want to play it safe and just hide in the bushes and just send out an echo and be like, let the echo take care of it. Whatever.
Go take care of this for me, P-Hat.
Yeah, whatever type of gameplay style you choose. And I really like how they kind of have taken a lot of the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom gameplay and put it into a top-down Zelda style where you can play it any way you really want. So that, I really enjoyed that. So, but But let's get into the nitty gritty here and talk about the actual world of this version of Hyrule. I didn't actually realize this until a couple more times viewing the trailer, but this is the world of A Link to the Past, the exact same
Yeah.
Hyrule from A Link to the Past, and likewise A Link Between Worlds. And so getting to see that Hyrule again and seeing those callbacks to that game, I was really excited to actually start exploring this world to see if there's anything that had changed. And likewise, the fact they sort of brought the Dark World back with the Still World. That was really cool. And so did you enjoy exploring this version of Hyrule, and what was your favorite region to explore?
I did enjoy exploring it, especially because, like I mentioned, I like this graphic and art style. I knew that it was the same map as, or at least pretty much the same words, as A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds. I never got through A Link to the Past. I think I started it, but I never finished it. That's nothing against the game, I just didn't. But I did play A Link Between Worlds years ago, and I absolutely loved that. Loved the wall merging art mechanic. That was super, super cool and so fun. I loved everything about it. I clearly did not explore it enough because there were so many things popping up in other people's videos that I thought, oh my gosh, how did I not know that? Again, I was so story driven that I was like, let's go, go, go. And I didn't want to lose track of where I was. I will give myself that because I chose to only stream it, and I could only stream it one day a week. And after like an hour and a half, I start to get tired, just the nature of having a child, I guess. I was so afraid of losing where I was that I didn't always get myself explore too much. So that might be part of it on the second playthrough. I'm looking forward to that. But favorite region? Oh, that's difficult. Honestly, I might be super simple and just say like Hyrule Castletown, because I've always been a sucker for that lively village type of area. Now, that was not my favorite dungeon. Not that it was a bad dungeon. It wasn't. Hyrule Castle was not a bad dungeon. But I just loved that area and seeing it so full and alive, especially because our past couple of games have been Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, where we would see flashbacks of a nice, beautiful kingdom in Hyrule Castletown, but never get to explore it ourselves. So it was nice to explore it again with it being alive, except when it was covered in Still World, but that didn't last too long.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Hyrule Castletown's not a bad pick, because, I mean, in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, we thought they might be rebuilding in Tears of the Kingdom, and they start doing that, but not fully all the way. But like, it's really cool to see a fully blown Hyrule Castletown and getting to explore that.
Yes,
and see it alive and well, and see the actual citizens of Hyrule going about life. I mean, we haven't had that in a Zelda game since Twilight Princess. I think that's been a long time.
I think so.
It's been a long time. So.
Yeah, because Skyward Sword was Skyloft, which is not the same thing.
Right. So, but yeah, that was not a terrible pick. Mine would probably have to be Mount Lanayru. I really enjoyed exploring Mount Lanayru, especially like small detail, but I just thought it was really cool. But you know how you go into the caves and occasionally you have those like side scroller sections. Well, as you're climbing Mount Lanayru, it starts as a regular cave, but then you see it becoming slowly more and more icy. That was a really cool detail that they added as you're climbing that. And then when you finally get up there, making your way through the blizzard, and then just, as all that clears and you see the snow, and the music for that area is really cool too. I just, it's really, soothing. It's an icy area, so you're going to have like icy theme type music. So it kind of reminded me of Snow Peak in a way from Twilight Princess. So I really enjoyed that as well. Again, not my favorite dungeon. We'll kind of get into dungeons in a little bit. The Still World. Along with Hyrule, we have the Still World, and that's basically this game's equivalent version of the Dark World. So did you enjoy exploring the Still World and its challenges?
I did. Even though I had watched the trailers, I guess I had forgotten between like having a child and having a long time not looking at any of the Echoes of Wisdom stuff when I finally was able to play it. Like, just how everything is mapped out and everything's turned, it's upside down, it's to the side, and really making good use of your echoes to figure out how to traverse everything. And I know I mentioned this in stream. I thought, my gosh, if this was a more realistic, quote unquote, 3D Zelda game, this would be considered incredibly dark. Like seeing the NPCs locked in the still world, I'm like, this is like dark and the characters are cutesy. I'm like, imagine if this was like Twilight Princess-esque, or yeah, frankly, even Breath of the Wild. Like if it had been even just one of those two, but especially Twilight Princess, I'm like, this would have been considered a lot darker, but it's mitigated by the fact that it's so cutesy. But yes, I loved going through it, and I thought it was a nice different take because we have had Dark World, we have had the Depths, we have had Low Rule, and they're usually the same world you've been in, but dark. The same map, but this was like, no, this isn't even the same layout. Like, it is the same layout, but because everything's so messed up. I'll say I was kind of worried when I learned about the still world, because I was like, really? We have another dark world? Like, we've done this a million times. But Zelda knew what they were doing. The Zelda team knew what they were doing. And I was like, no, it's just different enough that it was still fun to explore.
Talking about the dungeons, I was really, and I'm sure a lot of Zelda fans will agree, it was really nice to have sort of a classic style Zelda dungeon layout again.
Yes.
With looking for a boss key, those mid-bosses, those secret items that you have to find, finding those small keys. My little sister picks on me all the time about that. She's like, why do you care about the small keys? I'm like, you just don't know.
They're important, okay?
Yes. So, but yeah, it was really awesome to have a classic Zelda dungeon layout again. And so, I guess I'll kind of start with my favorite. My favorite was the Fire Temple in the Elden region. I just love the music in that dungeon. I like it, you know. And Fire Temples, I've always gravitated towards. I love the Fire Temple from Ocarina of Time, and I guess it's another reason why I love this dungeon is because the boss that comes back in this dungeon is Volvalia, and it was so. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, no way they're doing this. And so I just a blast from the past, getting to see, you know, that boss from Ocarina of Time come back in this way all these years later, and making not only that, but just making the boss fight feel somewhat familiar but brand new as well, because he's still coming out of those you know, those places in the lava, and then but his attacks have morphed and they've changed a bit, and it's since the last time you fought him, so it wasn't just the same boss fight again, it was more evolved, and I really enjoyed that. So the Elden Temple, or specifically the Fire Temple in the Elden region, was my favorite.
So that one is really, really close for me. Sorry, I'm having to look through the list because I'm like, since it took me so long to do it. So it's like, I'm forgetting. That one's really, really close for me because I also love the callback, because Ocarina of Time is my favorite Zelda game. So I love that callback, and the music. It was definitely, possibly, I haven't taken the time to listen through each theme together, but it was probably my favorite theme. I remember walking in being like, oh, this is a really nice theme. My only criticism is the dungeon's too short. I feel like maybe on a different day, I would definitely say it's my first. I want to say Pharaon might actually be my favorite. Again, on a different day, I might say other ways. I'm really surprised that I'm saying the Pharaon Temple too, because one, it's Goma, and I hate spiders. Like, I don't have arachnophobia, but I think anyone sees the giant fuzzy spider and goes, no. But if I see a tiny spider, I'm not usually going to freak out. But surprisingly, Pharaon being long and challenging, and like just getting to the Pharaon Temple, I think this was one of the first times I felt confident in my own abilities and that I've grown as a player, that I really wanted to not need help, and sometimes I still did, which nothing wrong with that. But I was so proud of myself, I think, for being able to get through the game without a guide. And because for a long time, even games that I knew, I looked up full guides and would just like follow it to a T and not trust that I knew what I was doing, even with games I had played before, which is kind of silly. But I just really enjoyed that experience. I honestly actually don't remember if I had a hard time with Goma. I don't think I did. Again, on a different day, I'd probably say the Fire Temple, but for now I'm gonna go with the Pharaoh Temple, even though I don't remember what the music sounds like.
So now we kind of get to the topic of our least favorite. My least favorite was Pharaon. I did.
I can understand why.
Yeah,
I totally can.
that dungeon in particular. I mean, it's normal to get lost in a Zelda game. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, if you get lost, it kind of means you're playing the game right. You're supposed to explore and figure it out, you know. But in this particular dungeon, I got turned around so many times, and I'm just like, I thought I was going this way. Apparently, it's this way, and then I would go that way, and then it turned out it was not there either, and I was just like, it ended up taking a way much more time than I expected. I did enjoy the Farron region though, because it felt very Majora's Mask with the Deku scrubs and just kind of like the Deku Palace music, sort of those little themes of that in there. I really enjoyed that. So that was kind of my least favorite dungeon, though. After all that, you get to Goma, and Goma's a very easy boss fight.
Honestly, if I'm remembering correctly, yeah.
But anyway, that's just my opinion on that. So what was your least favorite?
Okay, this one's hard, mostly because I did decently enjoy each dungeon, but what makes it difficult is, I would say my least favorite dungeon is actually not my least favorite boss. So my least favorite boss is Mogriff from the Gerudo Sanctum. But I enjoyed the Gerudo Sanctum, so I'll let that slide. My least favorite was Jubal Ruins. I did not like Jubal Ruins, and it wasn't even that bad when it came to water mechanics. It wasn't. I just kept having this feeling of, they are on the right track. There's something fun about this, and it wasn't until I had watched other people play it that I was like, it's so cheesable. And I didn't even realize how cheesable it was. And normally I don't mind cheesability, especially because it's one of the hard ones. But what didn't help is I played the Gerudo Sanctum first. I think maybe I would have enjoyed it more if it had been my second dungeon, not my third. The boss wasn't terrible, especially once I got the Shark Echo. I mean, that thing was a lifesaver. Anytime I was underwater, I used the crap out of that. But it's not the worst water dungeon there's ever been, even though I haven't played it myself. I hate just watching the Lake Bed Temple from Twilight Princess. I actually don't even mind the water temple from Ocarina of Time too much. But yeah, I'm kind of just repeating myself at this point. It just felt like it was close to being fun, and it was, but I just didn't quite enjoy it. But I maybe would have enjoyed it more had it been my second dungeon instead of my third.
And I would also say that it's not really and truly that's not on you, because the game pushes you towards Gerudo Desert in the very beginning.
I felt like it did too.
Yeah, it really does push you towards Gerudo Desert in the very, and so you do Jabul Ruins, after that. And so to go from a dungeon that was really really challenging and one that you thought was really fun, to go to another one that's just, kind of, like you said, sort of very cheesable.
That's how I felt in Tears of the Kingdom, because I did the Wind Temple first, then I did the Fire Temple, and then I did the Water Temple, and I was like, this was a letdown, especially because I think a lot of people did the Wind Temple first in that game, because, I mean, the storm is right there. So everyone did that, and even if the boss was easy, it was an epic battle, the music was fantastic, and then you get to the Water Temple, and you're like, Sidon, you're useless. I'm sorry.
So, fun fact, not to go off on a little tangent here for a little bit. Fun fact.
I already did.
Yeah. When I was going through Tears of the Kingdom for my first time, the Water Temple was actually the very first dungeon I did. Because in Breath of the Wild, Zora's Domain is your first place. So I naturally was like, you know what?
Yes.
I started in Zora's Domain first in Breath of the Wild. Let's start in Zora's Domain in Tears of the Kingdom. And as a first dungeon, I thought, this isn't terrible. And then I went on to the Fire Temple, and then I did Wind Temple. I did Wind Temple third. But I totally get it. Just the difficulty and just the look and design of those two dungeons. It definitely is. It can throw you off, very much so. But now the big part of this whole game, the story. The part that probably surprised everybody, which was just how big and how deep and occasionally how dark this game gets. The game literally opens with Zelda about to be executed and framed for a crime that she didn't commit. Was not expecting that. So
no.
Yeah, so what were some of the things that really surprised you about the story? What did you enjoy most about the story?
I enjoyed the darkness of it. For sure. I was so surprised by that. And like I said, had it been a different art style, different graphics, more realistic graphics in 3D, I think more people would understand just how dark it is. Um, so I like when they do that, almost a subversion of expectation, where it's like, oh, this is such a cutesy looking game. Oh, just kidding. Kind of like with Wind Waker, everyone thinks it's such a cutesy game, and it definitely has those elements. But you look at how you finally defeat Ganondorf in Wind Waker, and it's like, that's a sword in his skull, and he turned to stone. That's terrifying, and he steals little girls trying to find Zelda, so that's creepy. But so I would say, as far as what I enjoyed the most, it's either the fact that it was dark or the fact that Link wasn't the pseudo damsel in distress. Because I know people get tired of Zelda being the damsel in distress. Does not bother me. Because I'm like, that's a classic storyline. I don't care as long as the game is fun and there's some decent lore to go with it. And of course, I'm someone who liked the story of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, even though I don't
Me
like
too.
that form of storytelling. Yes, it's like I will totally agree with everyone. We need to stop having everything be memories. Absolutely. But I still enjoyed it for what it was and loved. Oh, I love Tears of the Kingdom story. Just really, really took me for a whirlwind ride there. But I did like that it wasn't just, it's now Zelda saving Link. It's like she does, but he's moving. He's still doing stuff. It's just you're not playing as him. So I was like, I like that it wasn't just, we're reversing the roles right now. It's just, no, it makes more sense for you, the player, to be doing Zelda stuff rather than Link's, because his is actually, I think if we were playing as Link the whole time, it would actually be kind of boring because he's just stuck in the still world most of the time. So it's kind of a tie between the direction they went with having a female protagonist, as well as the fact that it's a lot darker than you would expect for the way the graphics would lead you to believe it would be.
Yeah, kind of going back to you were talking about you were talking about the still world and how characters are turned to stone in the still world. I think the most terrifying one for me is seeing Jabu Jabu as stone in the still world. When I saw him, I was like, oh my
Oh my gosh.
gosh, that creeped me out the first time I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And so and then of course you have really parts where you just feel really just sad for the characters,
Yeah.
like the little Deku scrub who you can't help but just feel bad. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and then of course and then we have the surprising introduction of a brand new villain. It's not Ganon in this game, which was
Yes.
such a shock to me that you fight Ganon halfway through the game and then you realize, nope, he was just an echo of a much bigger
Yeah.
villain by the name of Null. That was so the fact that
Love that.
we now have Ganondorf, we now have the one responsible for Ganondorf, which is Demise, and now we have one who's just really just been a void consuming everything by the name of Null. So I haven't seen a whole lot of people talking about this. I would love Null to come back as a villain in a 3D Zelda game, because now we have lore about why he
Ooh,
is.
yeah.
We now have lore about why he exists and why the Golden Goddesses created Hyrule, and so that was another big thing about the story I really enjoyed, was the reintroduction of the Golden Goddesses from Ocarina of Time.
Yes.
Just seeing them come back, and not only are they back, but they actually speak to Zelda. They actually have dialogue in the game.
Mhm.
That was such a welcome surprise. And again, just showing how the Zelda team, they managed to hide and keep a lot of story stuff, just buried until you actually finally get the game yourself. Like, I wasn't expecting the Golden Goddesses to be in this game. That was such a big surprise.
No.
That was such a big surprise. Like, I about lost my mind when I saw that for the first time.
Yes, the lore was so good. And I think at least I hope for people who felt disappointed in Tears of the Kingdom for not really adding to the lore, at least not the way they wanted. And I am one of the people that feels that some people set themselves up for disaster when it came to Tears of the Kingdom. They're entitled to feel that way 100%. I can't blame them. But I'm also like, okay, maybe you set your expectations a little too high, but you also should have high expectations when it comes to Zelda games. That's fair. I just didn't think about it that much, and that's just how I was. But the lore was fantastic. And again, calling back to Ocarina of Time being my favorite Zelda game, having the golden goddesses in the different lore, it's like I never asked why they created Hyrule. Never asked that question. It was just, especially for those of us that are Christians, I don't know. I like creation stories. They're fascinating to me, especially comparing to what we believe about that. And, for us, we're like, oh, well, God created everything just because he wanted to, because he loves us and loved us into existence. And for the golden goddesses,
I
I,
totally agree.
I, I loved learning that there was a why and that there was this evil villain. And moreover, I remember going through that last section, that last dungeon, if you will, to get to Noel and listening to the music and noticing that there were sounds that sounded like Tri, like the vocalizations of Tri. And I remember thinking, Noel's gonna look like Tri, isn't he? And he did. He looks like those little creatures. And I was like, I knew it. I knew it. They're like almost like two sides of the same coin, but not quite to that extent. But I was like, I knew it, which kind of made Noel a little bit cute. And
Until
if
you
he,
start slicing him up and you
yes,
realize what's inside of him. That's even. I mean, he
yes,
starts to look really creepy. The more you start
he does.
picking away at him. Yeah. Speaking of Tri, we haven't exactly really talked about Tri yet. What did you think of Tri as a character? Tri reminded me a lot of Fi from Skyward Sword. The way,
I felt like Tri was a much more enjoyable Fi.
Yes.
Fi. I normally say Fi.
Yeah.
I don't care. It
Either
doesn't
way.
matter. But I got that same sense too. Almost the, I'm not human. I'm not Hylian. I don't have the same understanding of emotions and everything that y'all do. Whereas Fi was more robotic. I don't know. And I still enjoyed like Fi's goodbye and was emotional about that. And I thought it was an earned emotional scene. Some people don't, and that's fine. But Tri felt like what they were going for when it came to Fi. And Tri is also just incredibly adorable. I love it. I'm sorry. When you stand still for a minute and he just sits on Zelda's head, I'm sorry. That is the cutest thing. And the way Tri is trying to figure out emotions and trying to understand it.
Yeah, I thought Tri was a great character, and just, it definitely lots of callbacks to Fi, in my opinion. And again, I don't know if it's Fi or Fi. I've heard it both ways.
No one knows.
people can grill me in the comments. Anyway, but yeah, but moving on to kind of like, the big epic final fight with Null. That was so cool, getting to fight alongside Link. And the big and the combination of Zelda's Lullaby and the big heroic Zelda theme playing side by side, like that was such an epic fight. The only thing that turns me off from that final boss fight is the lead up to it. You have to do a semi mini dungeon with Link. That I never got to tune in much to your final stream, so I didn't really get to see you do that part. Did you have trouble with that little final mini dungeon? It's like, trying to get Link through some of the doors and stuff like that. Because there was one particular part where I was just like, Link, go, go, like do the thing. And I was just like, and then finally I got it to work. But like, and afterwards I was cool. But I like this just slowed down the whole pacing of the final, what's supposed to be the final epic part of the game.
I didn't mind it too much, but I did have one room, and I'm curious if it was the same room where this I do think was user error on my part. I just could not figure out. It was where he's supposed to get a key, and I kept trying to have him go up through the middle, and I was like, why can't I get any of the echoes to work to get him to jump up? And then I realized I was supposed to get him to the other side where he would go up, then he would go through and go back down and or hit the button to get the key or something. So that was just me being dumb, and once I figured it out, I was like, oh, I like what they were trying to do, but I would have to agree, it did feel like it kind of slowed down the game just a little bit. But I loved fighting alongside him. Love that he has unlimited health, I guess. And I thought that it was a decent balance between he's helpful, but not so much that he's taking out Noel super easily. Like you still have to almost coordinate. Like, okay, don't go for that appendage over there. He's not near it. And if you try to pull on that one with Tri, he's not going to get to it in time. So you need to go to the one that's near him. But also, he's not useless. He actually is helpful. So some people might disagree with that, but I did like fighting alongside him. But like you, I had just one room that I was like, why am I struggling with this?
Yeah. And another thing I really thought was really interesting, even though the Triforce breaks apart, for the first time we do see, that Null is able to use the complete Triforce, even if it's just for a brief minute, to pretty much eradicate all of Hyrule for a brief minute. Like, we've never seen the Triforce used for, like, pure evil. We sort of see it in Ocarina of Time, but like that would,
Yes.
kind of like the aftermath of all that. But like, we never actually get to see like Null make that, or like we never get to see like Ganondorf make that wish and then cause all the destruction. In this game, we see that Null makes the wish and all of Hyrule gets sucked into the void. The reintroduction of the Triforce, if the Golden Goddess is in this game, I'm sure the Triforce is gonna be in this as well. And when it comes down just shimmering in that golden light, I was like, thank goodness this thing is back. I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I really thought those games were lacking without the Triforce. I was like, that is like the big relic of Hyrule. That's why good and evil are always fighting, is because of that central relic. And when it's not there, it just like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool to see the Triforce come back and be used effectively in the story.
I like that the Triforce is, or one of the pieces is in Null, and like you see it gradually appear more and more as you're fighting Null, and you're like, I've almost got it.
Yeah, when they both pull it out together, when Link and Zelda both pull the Triforce out together, and then they both make that wish together to bring Hyrule back, and it was really cool. But overall, I really just enjoyed this game's story. And is there anything in the story you would have liked to have seen? Is there any place where you thought it might have been lacking? The only thing I did not like is they called the Triforce the Prime Energy. Why? It's just a small nitpick. It's nothing big. I'm just like, just call it Triforce. Not hard. We've had that name for the past almost 40 years now. Just call it Triforce.
It does make me wonder, like, what was the original? What's it called in the original Japanese? Was that like the English translation? They decided to call it something else. Is it actually called something else in the Japanese? If so, what? And does that? Because sometimes when it comes to translations, when you learn what the Japanese is in context of the Japanese language, which I know nothing about, so I have to default to people who actually speak the language and understand context, sometimes it makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, this was just the people that translated it. It was kind of hard to make that fit. I can understand that. But I'm like, there's no reason to not call it the Triforce. Like, even if this is someone's first game, Triforce just makes sense. It would have been interesting if like Tri was calling it that, but also his name is Tri. Just call it the Triforce. Like, we were all thinking it. Yeah. The moment he appeared, he's called Tri. It's like, oh, because he has little like bits of Triforce-esque things coming off of him. It just makes sense. Also, I like that we have a competent king who cares about Zelda. Yes. King Daphnis in Wind Waker has a redemption, so that's nice. But in general, unfortunately, most kings kind of suck, or they're completely absent, which I can understand why. King Rome, obviously, like his spirit or whatever in Breath of the Wild is extremely remorseful, and you read his diary where he's like, you know what, this is my last day trying to be hard on her. If it doesn't work, and doesn't find it at the Spring of Wisdom, I'm gonna do a totally different tactic. And it's like, you probably should have done that tactic from the beginning as a father, but okay. But he's disrupted because he's killed, and that's really sad. But this one, like if I'm recalling, like he pushed Zelda out of the way when he fell into the still world. So competent, actually protecting her. And I like his interior battle of like, as your father, I don't want to send you into this, but I recognize that I have to ask you to do it because you are the chosen prophetess. And it's like, oh, that's tough. I like having a nice, like, really good king. Also so silly. It took me forever to understand General Right and Minister Left, or whatever it was. I was like, that took me way too long. And I felt so dumb. I was like, left and right. Duh. And I like Blueberry. Like, Impa having a brother, that was new. Love that.
But I really enjoyed the writing in this game.
Yes.
The dialogue and the writing was really, like, it could have been written for a 3D Zelda game. It really just, it feels like it could have been. It was that good. So yeah, but I really enjoyed the story, aside from them calling the Triforce the Prime Energy. That was weird.
That was weird.
But yeah, the reintroduction of the Golden Goddesses, the Triforce coming back, learning why they created Hyrule, that just kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I really hope Null, and likewise the Golden Goddesses, maybe will show up in another 3D Zelda game, because now we know, like, if the Golden Goddesses created Hyrule to stop him from consuming everything, does that mean he's basically under Hyrule in every Zelda game that's ever existed?
Right.
He's basically the bigger evil of all evils now. And so, I mean, we have Ganondorf, we have Demise, who both are really evil, but, like, this is, like, the one that could consume both of them if he were to basically come back. And so I would love to see Null come back in a big 3D Zelda game.
Oh, I definitely would too. And it really goes to show that as much as some people, not everyone, some people complain about not having consistent lore in the Zelda game. I'm like, and maybe it's just because I'm a sucker for anything Zelda. I'm like, I kind of like that the lore tends to be vague. And yeah, I won't lie, it gets contradictory at times. But it makes it so that there's so much openness and leeway for the creators to just make something else. And that's on purpose. That's clearly on purpose by the creators. And there's nothing wrong with having not contradictory and super consistent lore. I think about some of the games that my husband plays and some of my friends play, that there is very clear lore, and the fans will be outraged if they're not consistent with it. And they like having those callbacks and everything. And we have callbacks too as Zelda fans. But for me, I'm like, if they had over-explained the Golden Goddesses in Ocarina of Time, we couldn't have had this game as it is. So it makes me not really bothered by vagueness. I don't know. It could be another one of those, you're just a sucker for anything Zelda. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's fine. I enjoy them, so what do I care?
Right. Well, even sometimes the lore tends to contradict itself. Like, the lore of the Golden Goddesses throughout all of the games has pretty much remained consistent. I mean,
that's true.
I mean, in Ocarina of Time, we hear that creation story, and even in that creepy Twilight Princess cutscene before it starts to go real crazy dark, you see that homage to the Golden Goddesses, and they basically tell that same story again. And and then you see it again in Echoes of Wisdom, but then we learn why they created Hyrule. So the lore of the Golden Goddesses, they created Hyrule, and then upon departing, they created the Triforce. And so so the lore behind them has pretty much stayed consistent. So if they wanted to do this and bring Null back and bring them back in a much bigger 3D Zelda game, they totally could do it. And I think Zelda fans, both old and new, would totally be okay with it. I think it'd be amazing if they did that. But yeah, just kind of wrapping up here, final thoughts. Would you want another game with playable Zelda, or did you miss Link?
I mean, I miss Link-ish, but not in this game, because the way they implemented Zelda and her Echo ability and being able to use Sword Fighter ability was just so well done, and I'm much more open to it now. I don't know if I would want them to do it the exact same way, and thinking I'm like, this could translate to 3D well, but I do think there's something about like those caves that would go side-scrolling that I'm like, yeah, that wouldn't translate into a 3D game, so it really works for what they chose to do. I mean, it's very clear that this was inspired by certain mechanics of Tears of the Kingdom. They just used it in a different way, and I absolutely loved it. But I would be open to a different way of Zelda being used. I can't think of it, but I'm like, you know what? You've convinced me, Nintendo. There is a market for Zelda being playable and it not being cheesy. And it wasn't we're girl bossing feminist type thing. It was just, we want to do this mechanic and it makes more sense for Zelda to use it.
And it's fun, which is the ultimate goal. And I think, that was kind of my one worry going into this game was, I mean, the summoning the echoes seems cool, but I didn't know if I was actually going to have a whole lot of fun with it. I'll be quite honest, going into this game, I was like, let's just get to that sword fighter ability, that way I'll have that to kind of just spice up that gameplay. As I started learning more echoes and getting the hang of it more, I began to realize, oh, this is actually a lot of fun. And then
Yeah.
you know, especially when you learn those more advanced echoes with the knights and of course the P-hat and then the bigger, you know, the whiz robes, and you get to summon those to fight you like that. It becomes a whole lot more fun to have a lot more variety to choose from. So yeah, I really enjoyed being able to play as Zelda, and I would not mind another Zelda game where we do play as Zelda. And if they want to make her a playable character, just the sole protagonist of a 3D Zelda game, would not mind that either. If they can translate it well.
Yeah.
If they can translate it
Exactly.
well, you know, as long as they can translate it well and that it has really fun gameplay and engaging gameplay like this game had. So yeah, I didn't miss Link. It was really cool to see him. It was still involved. That was kind of also my worry, is that, you know, Link would, once he fell through that void in the very beginning of the game, that he was gonna be gone and we wouldn't see him again.
Yeah.
But I was really cool to see that he's actually involved, and you know, you're both kind of on this quest together. And so, final rating, what would you give this game out of 10?
It's either a 9 or a 9.5, and the only things, possibly plural, that make me not give it a 10, this is so silly, but how many people did not know the name Zelda as far as the NPCs? They're like, oh, Zelda, what an interesting name. I'm like, how do you not know the princess's name? You cannot tell me you guys are not in contact with each other, that you don't at least, like, even if you've never seen her, know the princess's name.
I don't think Link and Zelda know each other in this game either.
That I was fine with.
Yeah.
I was fine with her not knowing Link, but he should know. I mean, I guess he never explicitly says whether he knows her or not, but for everyone else, I'm like, I can understand maybe some of the River Zora, just kind of their personality, or the Deku. That makes sense. But I'm like, you're telling me the Gerudo didn't know? Like, I don't know, maybe it depends on where it is, that they would at least know the name. But maybe not, that's a small thing. And even though there was a lot of good music, it was not my favorite music in the series. Not that doesn't mean it was bad. Like, heck, Wind Waker has fantastic music, but I'm not a huge fan of the dungeon music. Maybe because it's a lot more atmospheric, which there's nothing wrong with that. Look at Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time. I adore that one. But yeah, my gripes are small potatoes gripes. That's the only thing not keeping it from a 10, and even then I would say 9.5 out of 10.
I would actually go further up. I would give it a 9.8. It's just small little gameplay things that just kind of threw me off. Again, with that really long strand of echoes, that's one.
Yes, forgot about that. Yes.
That was one thing I really didn't like, and then just not calling the Triforce. Literally, just small little things like that. Other than that, this game absolutely surpassed my expectations with how good it was, and how fun it was. And so, if they ever were to do something like this again, or if they ever wanted to do a sequel to Echoes of Wisdom or something like that, I would not be opposed to it. So, Nintendo, kudos to you for making me a believer, because I was a doubter big time. So
nice.
But Geek, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion. It was really awesome to kind of really dive deep into this, because again, I did my review of this last year, and it was, and I really didn't have a whole lot of time to really go into all the nuances of what I really enjoyed and what I, would have changed, So it was really cool to get to talk with you about this, especially hearing your fresh thoughts after just beating the game. So that was just really, I've had time to really sit on it and just think about it. You're coming off just fresh beating it, so it's really cool to kind of just see, where our thoughts, where they kind of collide and where they're different. So it's really awesome. Just thank you for being here. And where can people find you if they want more of your content?
Yes, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it. They can find me on YouTube, just The Geek Apprentice. Mostly been a lot of streaming, usually Friday and Sunday nights. Been having trouble finding time to do videos, but when I do manage to get videos out, they tend to be Zelda, Animal Crossing, or the Hunger Games. I'm on Instagram, but that's usually just to be like, hey, I'm live. That's literally it. So mostly just YouTube.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Geek. Her YouTube link will be in the description below, and give her a sub. She's awesome. She was one of the first YouTubers to ever reach out to me, and I got to collab on her channel a while back, getting to discuss Tears of the Kingdom, and it was so much fun. You guys are legends. But anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. Really close to 1,300 subs. Want to get there really fast. So thank you guys so much. And until the next video or next live stream, take care, everyone.